Okay, yeah. I'm sure Monty already welcomed you, but I'd also like to extend my welcome to everybody to the first in a series of FAIR workshops that our FAIR early adopters group is putting on. Um, I'm not sure what Monty said yet, but basically what I'll just kind of fill you guys in on that these workshops that we're posting, um, we're posting them to provide an opportunity for researchers in DCG to come together to discuss and learn how FAIR principles can help improve the quality of the research that we're performing here in DCG, as well as to provide a forum to come together and practice what we hope are fairly simple practical steps that we can take to implement these principles in our daily work life. Those of us that are leading these workshops, including myself and Amber here today, as I mentioned, we kind of refer to ourselves as like the early FAIR adopters. So that is that we're a group of researchers here in DCG that we've been meeting for a bit over a year now to learn about FAIR and how we could implement these FAIR principles and practices into our daily work life or into our research. So at these workshops, our goal here is to go ahead and share what we've learned with you and discuss our experiences incorporating FAIR principles and practices into our workshops. So all these methods and techniques that we'll be teaching today, as well as future workshops, these are things that we have been actually using in our regular research. So we've been finding them helpful, and we're happy to share them with you, and we hope they can also be beneficial to you. We hope that these workshops also that we want them to be really interactive. We want to start to like kind of develop a culture of researchers interested in FAIR and DCG to share knowledge together. So, please, during these workshops, ask your questions, share your thoughts. As I mentioned, those of us leading it, we've been kind of at this for a bit over a year now, so by no means are we experts. So if you have any suggestions that you think can help support FAIR practices in our research, we would love to hear them. Please share them with us. So to start things off, here is, I just want to acknowledge our FAIR early adopters group. We are data scientists, epidemiologists, and biostatisticians that are working together in DCG. I'm not going to go ahead and necessarily name everybody, but I want to, sorry, did you guys get that out of the way? I do want to acknowledge Dr. Montserrat Garcia Closis and Dr. Jonas Almeida, who they're at the helm of our early adoptership, steering the way and kind of helping to really encourage us. In addition to myself, we also have Amber, who I imagine may have introduced herself yet, but if not, Amber Hurston is also going to be co-leading this workshop with myself. And I do want to acknowledge Wendy, Daniel, Paratroy, Srijan, and Jaya, and we're really fortunate to have this group with us here today. They're going to be helping in the Zoom breakout rooms that we will get to later on in the workshop, where you'll be given an opportunity to practice and get some hands-on experience with the code that Amber will be presenting in a little while. So as I said, we are hoping that these workshops are interactive. So to start things off, we thought it would be good and frankly helpful for us to hear from you guys. So specifically, it'd be great to hear sort of your motivation for why you actually came and registered for today's workshop. Is there something that specifically that you're hoping to learn today? It would also be great to hear, like, what are your ideas or your thoughts coming into this workshop about why you should bother incorporating FAIR principles into your research. It would be great to know if you think it could help address some specific challenges that you might be facing, or it would also be really helpful to know if you have some concerns about incorporating FAIR practices. Again, we really do want to hear your some like questions and concerns. If you have something that we can't really directly address in today's workshop, we certainly will try to follow up with you afterwards. And potentially we might be able to take your feedback and incorporate it into future workshops. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing for a few moments. And if you would like, if you would like to go ahead and unmute yourself or use the hand raise icon, or if you would prefer just putting something in the chat box, it would be great to hear from you all about these questions that I posed to you.
Hi, I'm Richard. I'm a postdoc at OEEB. So I actually, it's just, for me, this is pure curiosity. I thought this might be an opportunity for me to maybe improve my workflow with my current sort of projects, and perhaps FAIR would be a good thing to adopt into. But bearing in mind, I don't probably know what exactly the nuts and bolts of FAIR. And then I also thought that at least I perceive it to be kind of something that kind of relates to kind of, I think, the issues maybe that many of us are probably facing, that a lot of us, I think, are fellows and, short term. And I think there's probably an issue with continuity and kind of like passing on projects and legacy projects to maybe the next person, having to go through that iteration of like trying to find out where things are at, figure out what means what. So it seems to me that FAIR probably helps address that. And for me, I think I would love to be part of that solution.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. I think you hit on a lot of things that I think FAIR will help address. So yeah, thank you very much, Richard. That was really great. Anybody else? All right.
Hey, Tom, since no one volunteers anything, I want to volunteer the perspective of the data scientist. So a number of us today are data scientists, and we are looking over your shoulder, trying to advance and understand the data you need and the analytical environments where you work. And if you want to be very crass about it, you could say that we are trying to sneak the clouds into your work environment. So please participate. We'll learn from each other.
Yeah, thanks, Jonas. Yeah, and I'll put in a kind of an early plug now. We'll definitely be coming back to this later on, but we want to kind of continue the conversation after this workshop and everything. So we'll be providing you with some links to some Gitter channels where if you have questions about FAIR or the cloud, you could post them there, and our early adopters group and Jonas and his data scientists will be happy to try to help you out. So and that way we can all kind of support each other as we kind of venture forth into FAIR research practices. So let me go ahead and start sharing again. All right, so, sorry. Yeah, so to help kind of lead into what we'll be covering today, I'm showing here a list of what we think are some relatively common challenges, in addition to like some of the challenges that Richard mentioned, which I think can easily be put up here as well, that FAIR practices really can help address. So for example, I'm sure that some of you, I know I certainly have been in situations where data or code that I'm working with, it's not always clear of where the data that I want to use, particularly what version of data or what version of code I want, is stored. So I've been in collaborations where you end up with 5 different final versions of a data set or code that and it becomes kind of unbearable or untenable and very confusing as to which set of code or data you should be working with in a collaboration. Oftentimes, we are faced with barriers to accessing data or code, whether that is due to data use restrictions that prevent data from traveling from one place to another, or sometimes it could just be as simple as something as you're not being provided the information that you need to how to go about actually requesting access to data or code that you would like to use. Another common problem that I think can come up is wanting to use code that somebody else wrote, but it's in a proprietary software language like SAS, Stata, or MATLAB. And you could find yourself in a situation where you don't have that license to that proprietary software. So you can kind of run up against the wall in that way. So by the end of this workshop, we hope that we make it very clear to you how by doing or going through some of what we'll be practicing today, such as storing your data in a cloud resource like Box, keeping your data and your metadata in open source or non-proprietary machine readable formats, as well as your code also in the open source and non-proprietary programming language, how this will actually really bring us a long way to becoming more fair researchers and address issues and challenges such that I've listed here, or what Richard was bringing up, that issue of continuity. By going through these steps that we'll be practicing today, it can really help sort of that passing of the torch from one researcher to another as you sort of move on through your research career. So kind of as a bit of a refresher, because I'm sure some of you have heard about FAIR previously, whether it be in other seminars or perhaps you saw the last month's DCG linkage newsletter that had an article on FAIR. I want to kind of go through a bit of sort of a relatively high level overview, not to get too lost in the weeds of what does FAIR actually mean. So FAIR stands for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. So these are the FAIR principles relate to all research resources, including your data, your metadata, and the code. And they're there to help ensure sort of the data resources can really be used to their full maximal potential. So the findable, this is addressing that researchers need to know the location of research resources, including the necessary metadata to enable the appropriate use of those resources. So when we move data to the cloud like Box, this helps like really greatly facilitate findability because when we move data to Box, it enables locating the resources online using web addresses like URLs. And I'll come back to this point in a couple more slides. From findable, we go to accessible. And this gets at the question of that once a researcher can locate or find a research resource, they should be provided with the information that they need to know to go about requesting secure access to that data according to all applicable permissions. So I want to take a moment to just kind of address a question that I think sometimes comes up with FAIR research, that because you make your data resource findable and accessible, this is not the same thing as making your data resources or your data open access to the public. The data governance structures or all the regulations that are applied to your data set still apply when you make them findable, accessible. All the appropriate license and data use agreements and other data governance requirements, they still apply to your data set. So FAIR is not putting your data out to the public just for anybody to get access to it. They still have to go through the appropriate steps to request access to that data. From accessible, we go to interoperable. So once a research resource can be accessed, the question becomes how easily can it be used and integrated with other data resources? And this is greatly facilitated by using that machine readable, non-proprietary file formats such as CSV or JSON, as opposed to something like Excel, which is a proprietary file format. Similar for programming languages, those open source, non-proprietary programming languages like R, Python, Java, those are definitely preferential to programming languages for proprietary languages such as SAS, Stata, or MATLAB. And finally, from interoperable, this brings us to reusable. So the purpose of making your data resources findable, accessible, and interoperable ultimately is to enable that reuse of the data, to allow the sort of maximum full potential use of the data, whether it be to replicate and reproduce findings or to go ahead and allow a researcher to generate new findings. Before I move on, I'm just going to stop to ask if anybody has any questions about anything that I just mentioned here about findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, because they kind of on the face of it, sometimes they look sort of simple, but it can be a little bit confusing.
Yeah, I actually had one question, and this is kind of with respect to accessibility. So, I think a lot of the data that we work with are, human subjects, and thus they're subject to IRB protocol. So I'm kind of wondering how maybe FAIR could either that fits with that, or kind of works with that, or is this something that needs to be kind of sewn in features, say IRB protocols that we do wish to keep human subjects or identifiable data in the cloud.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Accessibility, I think one of the key components of accessibility is that we want to make it clear to researchers who might be interested in taking advantage of a data resource. They need to be provided the information that they need to go through to actually request access to that data. So when you have sensitive data like that we all work with, they need to know the process by which, if they want to submit a study proposal, how do they go about doing that? What are the steps that they need to go through to get approval and access to that data? And that could also include if they have to get IRB approval to get access to that data. So it's operating within all the data governance and IRB confines that your data resource may have attached to it. It's just that you have to provide that information to a researcher to go through the necessary steps to request access to it.
Tom, I just wanted to make a comment on that. So that's a very important point, that there are some, when we're working for sensitive data, it's very important that we have all the mechanisms in place for security access. And often we have different levels of security, like the highly restricted data, and then data that has personal identifiers versus data can be shared more broadly. And actually using the cloud, it usually facilitates that. So different levels of access for different people. And all the systems that we are now building for Connect are cloud-based. But that's a very important point. And I think we could talk about that. I'm sure Jonas will have a lot to say about it. This misconception whether the cloud is less secure, just because it can be very broadly accessible, but it can also make very restrictive access, and it allows these very different levels of governance. It facilitates that different levels of governance. We can discuss that at another time more, and people that know more than me about these things. But I think that's a very important question that keeps coming up. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Monty. And yeah, I will also mention that in a little bit. Actually, Amber's going to be showing a couple of slides about this, about how Box, you control those different levels of access to data resources that you're putting there. So that's something that we'll be getting to that in a little bit. Okay, you might have kind of caught on and alluded to in the previous slide. There's sort of two really important questions when you're trying to evaluate or regard how fair a data resource might be, and that's where are the research resources stored, and how or in what format are they stored in? So when thinking about fair, it's not a yes or no question. It's not my data is fair or my data is not fair. As we're kind of saying here on this slide, it's degrees of fairness. Fairness it's a spectrum. So with these questions of where and how are the research resources stored, we can kind of look at this this figure here, and perhaps the least fair situation we can have is when all of our research resources are stored on site. So for example, on a private server behind a firewall that's really difficult to get access to, or perhaps even a kind of a worse situation would be stored on your laptop. This could also, a situation like this, you could also find that your metadata, including questionnaires and other information about your research resource, they're stored as PDF files. So we all know PDF files, they're notoriously difficult to extract information from. It's very difficult to do it programmatically or automatically. So you're stuck reading everything and pulling the information you want from it. So that is certainly perhaps the least fair situation you could have. But fortunately, you can perhaps relatively easily, or there definitely will be some work involved, you could take the metadata for your research resource and you can move it to the web. So this is, for example, putting summary statistics, generating summary statistics and sharing that on the web, and other information about your research, and just putting that all on the web, even if it's still in PDF format. That goes a long way to improving the fairness, because now you're providing the research community with more information about the data resource, including how to request access to the individual level data. Importantly, when you're dealing with metadata and summary information, none of that information, I think it would be an extremely rare circumstance where sharing that would require any sort of data use agreement. I would imagine nearly every situation, when you're putting metadata on the web, there's really no reason not to make that publicly available. You can further build upon this by then also moving your data to the cloud. So when you do this, this greatly facilitates the findability and accessibility, because now you're enabling that locating of your data resources using a web address that could be assigned to your data once it's put into a cloud resource like Box. And on top of that, you're also now providing clear information, clear instructions to the research community about how to go ahead and actually request and gain access to that individual level data. From there, we can go ahead and actually, but this is the scenario that we're going to be kind of working in, or Amber's going to be kind of working with you. And this is going ahead and taking your data and metadata and putting it in a machine readable formats, moving that to the cloud, in addition to having any code associated with your data resources in open source languages such as R, and moving all that to the cloud resources. So when you do something like this, not only are you improving the findability and accessibility of your research resource, but because you're using machine readable, non-proprietary file formats, you're also greatly improving the interoperability of your data resources. And finally, perhaps the most fair situation is something called linked data, which I'm not going to say too much about this because it's a topic that probably warrants its own workshop. But what I will say about like linked data, what this is it's machine readable data that is interconnected with other data sources and metadata. So linked data, it's essentially mimicking the way that data is organized and interconnected on the web. So does anybody have any questions? All right. So now we start to kind of get into a bit more of what we're going to be practicing today. Based off the experiences of us working in this FAIR early adopter group, we found that probably the most accessible and easiest way for researchers in DCG to start becoming more FAIR researchers is to keep our data and data resources or data and metadata in Box And then we can go ahead and use an open source, non-proprietary programming language like R, which provides us some really simple ways to integrate with Box for running our analyses. And this is what Amber's going to be sort of leading you guys through today to practice that. We can also go ahead and build upon this, and we could go ahead and start using GitHub to organize and manage the code that we use for our projects. So this is actually going to be the focus of our next upcoming workshop, where we'll be kind of talking about the benefits of using GitHub as a repository for storing and managing our data. For today, however, as you might have noticed if you kind of took a look in some of the Box folders, the Box folder that we shared with you today, all of our data and metadata, as well as our code, everything's being stored in Box. Yeah, as I said, the GitHub will be an upcoming workshop, and we definitely encourage people to start exploring that, to consider that as a way for helping to better manage the code that they're writing. And last, before I turn it over to Amber, just say a couple of words about why taking the simple step really of taking advantage of Box here in DCG, it really does go a long way to making you a more fair researcher, and addresses a number of challenges that we commonly face. So when we move information or files or data to Box, Box automatically assigns a unique URL. So when this happens, when this is done, your data or your file can now be permanently and uniquely identifiable. So your data is staying alive. So when you come back to a project, months or years from now, you can still go ahead and easily locate the data that you were using for that project with that URL. Box makes it really easy to manage access and permissions to data. So what we were talking about a bit earlier, you have very fine control over who can see your data and access your data. Box also provides some really helpful information, like some sort of usage information. So amongst the investigators or collaborators that you've given access to view or to actually go ahead and access your data, you can see how they're going about doing that. Versioning control in Box is a very valuable tool that's provided. So with versioning control, this keeps track of how your data is being modified by you or your collaborators that you've given access to do such a thing. And Amber's going to be kind of coming back to this a bit in her part of the presentation. Using the tools and methods that we're going to be teaching you in today's workshop, you can integrate your data that's stored in Box with other data sources that might be other data, different data governance structures, without actually ever permanently moving your data. So your data can remain in Box. You're not going to end up creating multiple copies. It really helps keep better track of your data and more efficiently preventing that duplication of your data. And finally, because Box provides secure cloud storage, obviously anywhere that you have an internet connection and a laptop with your programming language available to you, you can always access and view your data or analyze it. So with that, I will stop and I'll ask one more time if there's any questions about what I presented, because I'm going to be turning it over to Amber, where she'll kind of be getting to some of the more practical steps here today that you can take to start using Box in RStudio.
If you could continue to share your screen though, Tom, I'll just tell you to advance the slides. Is that okay?
Yeah, definitely,
yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay, no questions or?
So for those of you, I didn't get a chance to introduce myself yet. So for those who don't know me, my name is Amber Herson. I'm a postdoctoral fellow in TDRP, and I'm excited to share with you all what we've been working on all this time. So you could go to the next slide, Tom. So for the hands-on portion of today's workshop, we'll be using the Box-R package to connect Box to RStudio. This package includes dozens of different functions, but we'll be demonstrating a few today that our group has found to be the most useful and commonly used as we've been exploring and using the package more. The functions we'll be using today will allow you to read data into R that's stored in Box without having to download it. And we'll show you how you can make updates to the data and then write the data back to Box using versioning control. Next slide. So just to reiterate the objectives for today's workshop, you'll learn how to read data from Box and run your analyses, then saving data and output to Box from RStudio. And we'll also talk about versioning control of data and demonstrate how to manage permissions to access data. Next slide. So before we go to RStudio, I want to spend a few minutes talking about Box. In order to access your Box folders and files from RStudio, you'll need to use some information from Box in your R code. We'll look at this together in the Box web browser in a moment, but I'll do a brief introduction to these here first. In the URL for your folder of interest, you'll find the folder ID. And similarly, if you go to the next picture, Tom, in the URL for a specific file, you'll find the file ID. And then if you click again, if the file has been updated, you'll find both the file ID and the version ID in the URL. And these IDs will be used, like I said, to connect your folders and read in data. Yeah, that's on next slide. So you can manage permissions for your Box folders when sharing access with collaborators by choosing permission levels for each person, which is shown here. And next slide. So just like folders, when we share a file with collaborators, you can manage permissions and access levels for each person when you share files. And lastly, Box allows you to monitor who has access to your data and the various activity related to those files. So at this point, I'm going to open the Box folder for this workshop in my web browser and kind of walk you all through some of these things. And I'd like all of you to do the same on your end so that we can look at these together. And I'll also be asking you to create your own folder. So please make sure to open Box on your end so you're ready to do that when we get to that part. So I will share my screen in a second. Okay, so here we have our Box folder that we shared with all of you. So you all should have access to this folder titled DCG Box RStudio Fair Workshop. So I'll give you just another second or two to open this up on your end, and then I'll point out some of these pieces of information that I was just mentioning that we'll need for running the R code. So if anyone hasn't tried to open the folder yet and is doing so for the first time and is having issues, please speak up or write in the chat and we can try to troubleshoot that for you as we go on. So like I mentioned earlier, if you are connecting to this folder in R, you'll need the folder ID, and you can find that by clicking into the URL, and you'll see folder / and then a number that I've highlighted here. So this is your folder ID, and you would copy and paste that information into your R code. So, and next I'll show you the file ID. So if we click workshop bcdata.csv to open this data file, and then we click in the URL again, we'll see file - and then a number. So it's this number here that we would copy and paste. This is our file ID. Now, let's say you were interested in uploading or loading a previous version of this file. So here, you'll see a button for details. It's a little paper with the letter I. So if you click that, you could see for this file, there's 7 versions. So click on that and we get the version history. So version 7 is current, and then we have all these previous versions. So to get, to access in R, one of our previous versions, I'll click, for example, version 1. So there's 2 important or useful, I should say, piece of information, the version number and the version ID. So the version numbers are here, version 1 through 7. And to get the version ID, we would click the version we're interested in, click in the URL. And again, we have 2 pieces of information now, the file ID after file / and the version ID after version /. And I want to point out that no matter what version of this file, 1 through 7 that you're looking at, this file ID will always remain the same. The file ID never changes from version to version. It's just the version ID or the version number that will change. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the main folder by clicking back to current version and then X out of our data. And now we're back in our workshop folder. So I want to show you about sharing. So for sharing a folder, we're in this folder here and we would click share button in the top right corner. And you can see when we do that, that this folder has already been shared with a bunch of people, all of you, all of our early adopter group. And you can see who it's already shared with by clicking these little circles here, and it'll bring up a list. So you can see in this list who this folder has been shared with and what their permission level is. If you'd like to go in and change someone's permission level, if you have the appropriate permission level yourself to do that, you would click manage all and can change any of the permission levels. So for sharing with a new collaborator, you would type in their name or email address here, and then this little blue text here with the drop-down menu, you can choose what level of permissions you'd like to give them. I think many of you will probably be familiar with this terminology here. It's pretty similar if you've used Google Drive or Dropbox or any sort of program like that. And so it gives you a little description here of what each permission level includes. So that's for sharing a folder. And the process for sharing a file is very similar. Oh, I do want to point out though that just as a reminder, when you share a folder with someone, it automatically gives them access to all of the subfolders and files that are nested in that folder. If for some reason there's a nested folder or file that you don't want them to have access to, you can manually change their permission for that, but automatically it grants the permission for everything within the folder. So to share a file, we'll click a file here, the workshop data. And again, in the top right corner, we have share, and you can see who this is already shared with, just like with the folder. You would put their name or email, and then here we have fewer options of permission levels. We have editor or viewer, so you can manage what level permissions you're granting them this way. So the last thing I want to point out in terms of tracking access and across collaborators is so if you click this details button again, this little I for this file, and then we have this section called access stats. So you can click view details, and it brings up a window that shows you some information about who has access to the data, what they've done, you know, how many times it's been downloaded, who's edited it. So you can scroll through and when they've done these things. So this is a useful way to track data use and access as well. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of this data file, and now we're back in the main folder. And at this time, I'd like to ask each of you to create a new subfolder within this main folder by clicking this button in the top right that says new, and you'll click folder. And then you can name your folder whatever you want to name it. Just make sure it's distinguishable from everyone else's in the group that's creating a folder. So I'm just going to use my first and last name. And the only other thing that you'll need to do is, as permission, you can click either editor or co-owner for this, you know, purpose. It doesn't matter much, just for practice. And then you can click create. So you should see your folder that you just created populate in the main folder, and I'll wait a second to allow others to do the same. I'm just refreshing to make sure everyone's with me. Let me know if you have any issues with that. Okay, should have a few more. Okay, great. So as you're finishing that up, the last step before we move to RStudio is I'd like you to move a copy of the sample code into your personal folder that you just created. So you're going to do that by hovering your mouse over this file called workshop code for RStudio box, over the 3 dots to reveal more options, and you're going to click move or copy. So you're going to choose your specific folder by checking the little circle, and make sure that you're choosing copy, not move. We want to leave it there, the original there, for other people to copy into their folder. So please choose copy. Okay, so I'll give everyone a second to do that. And now we're gonna open the R code in RStudio and go through some of these examples. So you can do that by finding your—
Hey, Amber?
Yeah.
Would you mind, can you take a moment to show how you did the copy again? There was some people missed that.
Yeah, so if you hover your mouse over the workshop code, which is in the main box folder titled workshop code for RStudio box session, and then click the 3 dots to reveal more options, you'll see a menu, drop-down menu, and you can click move or copy. So from here, you'll find your specific personal folder and click the circle to select it. And then be sure to click copy, not move. We want to create copies in our own folders. So you'll click that. And then to make sure, you should see it like this. If I click my folder, I'll see a copy of this code file. So I'll wait just another second to give people a minute to finish that.
Hey, Amber, this is Alyssa Klein. I don't think that us as like viewer uploaders have like the permission to do the copy. I see a lot of comments, including myself, that we don't like have that option.
Okay, so why don't I go back just for simplicity's sake, and I can copy it into everyone's folder.
Okay, great, thank you.
A good workaround.
Thank you.
Amber, I can up everybody's permission.
Okay. I was trying to think, I thought that too. I was trying to think what was faster.
Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't realize we were uploader, you couldn't copy.
Yeah. So go ahead, Tom, I'll wait.
Yeah, just give me a moment.
Yeah. And after Tom updates it, you might just have to refresh the page if you were one of those who is having an issue.
Yeah, I'm just about done, but most of you should be able to do it now. Two more to go.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, so everybody has editor access to this. So
Great.
yeah, as Amber said, you just might need to refresh a bit, but okay, so I see.
So I'll give those another second. Let us know though if that didn't solve your issue. Okay, so I think I'll move on now. So if you click into your personal folder, you should see the code that you just copied into there. And we are going to open this code in RStudio by clicking on the file. And you'll see in the top right corner, there's an open button. So if you click this, it should open in your RStudio, just like mine just did, because we all have RStudio installed, but I'll give people a second to make sure that everyone has it open. If for whatever reason that doesn't work, you can download the code to your computer, but obviously we're trying to avoid, part of this is avoiding downloading things when it's on the cloud.
Yeah, and it's very possible if people don't have Box Tools installed, which it's likely we didn't tell you.
I tested this though, because I thought the same thing, and it still works for me. So let me know, speak up if anyone that doesn't work for anyone. Just would be good to know for going forward too.
Yeah, I see Box Tools for some people. Yeah, so in this situation, I think it would be fine to just go ahead and just download.
Okay.
From your folder.
Sure. But just so you know, that, is once we go through this setup or this example code, that's something that that you can do is open it straight from your browser. So you can download. There's a download button right next to open. I'll give you another minute just because that might take another second, and save it and open that so we can use it. We'll still be using the folder that we created though in subsequent steps. Maybe people can give some like thumbs up when they're ready. Just, I'm not sure how much time to give people. So I know. Okay, I'm starting to see some thumbs up.
Yeah. And as Monty did mention, installing Box Tools, you can usually do it within a minute or so. It is a pretty seamless to do. So if anybody wants to also give that a try.
When you say Box Tools, Tom, can you explain what you mean?
Yeah, so when you select a file and you go to open it, in this case, Amber was able to directly open it from Box because she has Box Tools in there. So that enables you to open something using an application that's on your desktop without actually doing a permanent download of it. So any changes you make automatically get saved back to your file. Without Box Tools, in a situation like this, you're kind of stuck. You have to download the file, then put it back or upload it back to Box when you're done.
Right.
So yeah, it's a great thing to have available to you
if you're going to be using Box.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't I keep going now?
Reels, and that's probably something for future workshops to make sure we
yes.
mention that before.
Yeah, I'm glad that came up so we could mention that. Okay, so I'd like to encourage you all to follow along as I talk through the sample code and run the code along with me. If you get any errors or run into any issues while running it, don't worry. Just continue to watch and listen as I go through it. And we'll be breaking off into breakout rooms shortly where you'll get the opportunity to finish running the code yourself, and we can address any questions or issues that you're having. So the first step is installing a couple of packages that we'll be using that we'll need for running the code today. I know there's a few people here who haven't used R before. So for those people to run this chunk of code, you'll just highlight it. And then there's a run button in the top right bar here to run. I'm just gonna run the, I've already installed the packages, so. Okay, next is the authentication step. So the authentication step is the process of syncing RStudio with your Box account. With your Box account, we do this by running the Box auth function. This chunk of code is the same for all of us. You don't need to change any of these arguments that I've put in here. When you run it, if you were not already logged into Box, which we all should be, you would have a web browser like window pop up and ask you to log in. So I'm going to run this. The client ID and client secret arguments create the bridge between RStudio and Box in a way that is trusted by NIH. But it's you logging into your account that makes the actual connection to your personal Box account. So when you run this, you'll see in the console your name and your email that's attached to your Box account. And next, we're going to set our directory or working directory using box set WD, and our working directory is going to be the main Box folder that we've shared with all you all. So to do that, we need to set directory ID to our folder ID. So I'm going to open back up the Box in my web browser, and I'm going to go back to the main folder. And again, we get the folder ID by clicking into the URL, and you'll see folder / and then this number. So I'm going to copy it and then go back to R and then paste it here. So I'll give you a second to do that as well. So this folder ID will be the same for all of us because we're all connecting to the same folder.
Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah, Amber, hi, I have one question.
Sure.
So for the line, code line 20 sentence, how can I get the client ID and the client secret?
So you should be able to run this how I put it in the sample code without changing anything, because this client ID and client secret is the same for all of us. It's just a connection between Box R and RStudio and Box.
Okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, so we have our folder ID here, and I'm gonna run this line, and we get some information printed in the console that confirms our working directory. So we have, you'll see the folder path here to the Box folder that we are connecting to. You'll see our owner is Monsi, and the contents, number of files, number of folders. And that confirms that we're in the right place that we are intending. Okay, so moving on to reading in files. The box read function is what we'll use to read the data from box into your local memory. When we run this line of code, you'll see the temporary file path printed in your console. So after you close the RStudio session, the file or data is deleted from temporary local memory. It's not downloading it to your computer. It's just reading it into temporary memory. So I've named this data that we're going to read in, breast cancer data, and we're using the box read file. And now we need the file ID. So I'm going to go back to the web browser, and we're in the main folder here. And I'm going to scroll all the way down past everyone's folders, and we have workshop bcdata.csv. So I'm going to click that, and it will open here. And then I'll click in the URL, and we'll see file / and a number. And it's this number that we're going to copy again into our R code. And again, because this file is in our folder that we all have access to, this file ID is the same for all of us that we're pasting. Everyone should see the same number. So I'll give you a quick second to find that. And I will run this line now. Okay, so when I run that, we see the data in our global environment, the BC data, 50,000 observations, 9 variables. And in the console, we see this temporary file path that I mentioned to show where that's temporarily stored. Okay, moving on. So now we have our data loaded, and you would be running whatever sort of analyses on it that you would need to. Here we just put some example kind of analyses. So first, we're just generating some descriptive statistics. You can run that on some of the variables in our data set. Next, we're creating, and you can leave all this code as is and just run it. So next, we're creating a new variable, BMI cat. And then this next chunk just looks at some of the descriptive statistics for each category of this new variable, BMI variable we created. And the last little analysis piece runs a logistic model using some of the variables in our data set, just as an example of some analyses you might be running. So now we've made an update to our data set. We've added a new BMI variable. So now we want to save that updated data set to our personal folder. So we can use the box. Now we're, wait, sorry. Oh yeah, so we're gonna set, this time we're gonna set our working directory to our personal folder, because that's where we wanna save our data. Currently, our working directory is the main workshop folder. So again, to change the working directory, we're gonna need the folder ID. So we'll go back to the browser, and you'll find your personal folder. Mine is, let's see, right here. You'll click it. And again, in the URL, you'll see folder / and a number, and you're gonna copy that number. So this is the first time that this number is gonna be different for all of us, because we're all using a different personal folder. So you'll paste it in for directory ID equals. And when you run that line, again, you'll see printed on the console, this folder path, and now it should say your personal folder. So mine says Amber Herson. I have the contents. I have one file in there, which is the code, 0 folders. I'll give you another second for that.
Hi, Amber.
Hey.
Yeah, I have one more question.
Sure.
Yeah, so here we are using the R Studio to access some data sets or some R codes in Box. So is it possible for us to access some R code by using the Beowulf in the R Studio in Beowulf? Because sometimes our maybe sometimes when we just use the R Studio in our laptop, the running speed is a little bit low.
Right. That's a great question. I'm going to hand that question off to maybe Daniel Russ, who could speak more about that. I personally don't use Beowulf, so I'm not the best person to talk about that.
You don't really require, R Studio isn't really required to do any of this. What you just need is the underlying R language, and all of this BoxR will run in R. The only problem on Beowulf, the only problem you're going to run into is that anything that you're running that's talking to Box has to be run on Helix, because it's the only node that has access to the outside internet.
I see. So how to improve the running speed? Because sometimes my code will run several days.
Right. So in that case, what you'd want to do is, and you know, this is really not the forum to talk about it because we're trying to make things fair. But what you'll want to do is you'll want to move the data to pre-stage the data. So that would actually be a copy. But what I would suggest is make it a copy delete so that you don't look at it as you're storing the data on Beowulf. You're just caching it there while you run, and then remove the cache afterwards. Okay.
May I send an email maybe after the, yeah.
I'm happy to help you. You know what, Friday, we're going to talk about it later, but Fridays we have Fair Fridays. So I'm happy to, you know, we have office hours where we help.
Okay. Thank you so much, Daniel.
No problem.
Thank you. That was a good question that, you know, will apply to some other people as well, I'm sure. So the step we just did was to set our working directory to our personal folder that we created. And next we're going to write our data to our personal folder using the box write function. So we have the name of the data object here. We have the file name, which you can name whatever you want. I put in just the name of the data and then my initials. You could just leave it as BC data if you want. You can put your initials, whatever you want to do. And then there's an opportunity to put a description. So I put my initials, what the data is for, the date, and what I did to it, which was added BMI cat variable. So when I run this, it's going to give me on the console, it's going to print some important information for me. It's going to tell me the name of the file ID, different things like when it was modified and created, who it was uploaded, you know, this version was uploaded by, the folder name, all of this. So this information can come in handy later, especially if you're looking back through your code on a different day and trying to, you know, find a certain version that you've created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this information here by just highlighting it and copy, and I'm going to paste it in my code so that I have access to it later if I'm looking back. Obviously, we'll need to comment it out. So I'm going to highlight this block of text, and you can add comments by clicking code in the top bar here. And then about halfway down, it says comment uncomment lines, and it will turn this block of text into a comment for you. So here's just some documentation for me to look back on later if I need it. And I'll give you another second for that. So then so now let's say it's a whole different day and you are just sitting down for your workday and you want to load this file that we've just been using and start working with it. So to do that, you'll want to, of course, our working directory is already our personal folder, but if you were starting on a new day, it might not be already if you hadn't already run all the code that's above. So we're just, for best practices, we're going to set our working directory again to our personal folder. And you do that using the folder ID. And you can find that folder ID, like I've shown, in the URL in the web browser. But another place that now we have it handy is we pasted this information in our code. So if you pasted that information in yours, you should see parent folder name and folder ID. So you can copy and paste it here or get it from your URL in the web browser. So I'm going to run this, make sure it's correct. Yes, Amber Herson, that's my personal folder. And now we're going to read in the data that we've saved. So you can name it whatever you want it to be named in R when you read it in. I wrote BC data new to distinguish it from the previous data file we had. And we're going to use box read, and we'll need the file ID for this. So again, you can get the file ID from the URL in the web browser, but this is we have pasted this information. So we have the file ID here documented. So we can copy it from our documentation above and paste it. And just a reminder that this file ID will never change for this file. Even when you update it to new versions, this will always be the same, which is why we can just go above and capture that, copy and paste it. So I'm going to, one thing that I'll mention is that if you just put the file ID and don't put a version number, then you'll automatically get the most recent version, which is what we want here. So I will run this line and I'll see in my console the file path, the temporary file path. I'll see BC data new in my global environment. Now that you've loaded it, you are going to manipulate it somehow, based on your analysis. Here, I'm just giving you an example. Let's say we wanted to subset the data to only include those who are 50 years of age or older. So I am, that's what this line of code is doing. So I'm just going to run that, and we'll see our BC data new is now almost 37,000 observations instead of 50,000. Because we've subsetted it. And now we want to save this new version of our data. So we'll use the box write function again to save the latest changes that we made. And I've added a so I have the object name here, BC data new, the file name, which should be the same. We don't want to change the file name because then it'll save a new file instead of updating our data to a new version. And again, I put a description here of what I've done, ages over 50, I wrote to show what change I made to it. And I'm going to show you in a second. In the next step, I'll show you in Box where you can find this description if you want to find it, in Box. So many of us are, like I mentioned, you want to keep the file name the same because we want a new version, not a new file. And many of us are used to saving files and data with new file names after making updates. I think Tom mentioned this earlier too, like data underscore today's date or data underscore V10. And then you have dozens of different copies of the data to sort through, which can be confusing and it takes up a lot of space. And I'll be honest, I've been guilty of this for sure, but it's really not best practice to do this. It's better to be able to use version control. It's actually a fair principle to not have multiple copies of the data. And remember, with version control, you can always go back to a previous version if necessary. And I'll be demonstrating in the next step how to do that. Good annotation of your code will help keep track of these different versions. And that's why we've been copying and pasting that file documentation into our code when we save a new version of data. But you can use any tracking documentation that works for you. That's just what I'm demonstrating with. And just one side note on version control before we move on, Box doesn't allow you to compare files to highlight specific changes between two versions, but the DCG data science group is working on writing code that will allow you to do this. So we'll follow up with you on that when that is available. So I'm going to run this box write code. And again, we get this information printed in the console, and I'm going to copy it, paste it below just for record keeping. And I'm going to comment it out by clicking code up top, comment, uncomment lines. Okay.
Hey, Amber, just one more. We have a question from Batel about R Markdown. If we use R Markdown, would the PDF HTML automatically upload to Box when we knit?
That's a good question. I think so. I think because saving it saves it in Box, right? Like that's what I would think.
Yeah. Daniel or Paratroy, I think you guys have worked with this.
Or Wendy.
Yeah, when you knit, you're actually running the code. So yeah, it will run the code and it will appropriately upload the data as if it was any other function.
Great.
Hi, sorry, just to clarify, would the, it's Batel, would the PDF file or the HTML of the R Markdown, would that be uploaded onto Box?
No, the only thing that would be uploaded was when you call R, box write, when you call, then the file that you have in the box write command would upload. So in this case, BC data raw would be the one that's getting it's actually an object that's getting written up, not the knitted file.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Okay, so now we're just on to the last part of the demonstration here. So now, let's say you were interested in reading in a previous version of the file, of the data file for whatever reason. There's two ways to do that. So I've included both examples here in the sample code. You can either use the version ID, like file ID and version ID, or you can use the file ID and the version number. So I'm going to go back to Box to show you where to get, remind you where to get that. So I'm going to refresh my personal folder and I'll see my my data here file. So if I click on my data file, it opens up here. Then I will click details in this little I button here. And I just want to point out real quick, this is where you'll see the description that we saved the file with. And it shows the most recent description that was saved for that version. So to get the version ID, well, first I'll say, so you want to click here, it says 2 saved versions. And then this shows the version history. So we have version 1 and version 2, which is the current version. And these are the version numbers. So in the R, when we're loading a previous version using the version number, this is what we would use. And to get the version ID, we would click the version that we're interested in this case, version 1, click into the URL, and we see version / and then a number. So this number is your version ID. So I'm going to copy this number and I'm going to paste it in our where it says version ID equals. For version number, I've already put number 1 for all of you. And then the last thing we need is the file ID, which again, you can get from the URL in your web browser, or you can scroll up to your documentation and get your file ID that you've documented above, because it stays the same for every version. I'm going to paste it in both of these lines of code. So we have the file ID, version ID, and then file ID, version number. So obviously running both of these will just upload the same file, but that's fine. It's just to demonstrate to you. So now we have BC data original or raw, like Daniel was saying, and this does the same thing. And in the console, we see the file, temporary file path of where it's storing it while we're using it until we close R, and then it will be gone. So that was the last step I wanted to demonstrate. Before we move on to the breakout rooms, I want to just point out again that the BoxR package has lots of different functions here. I'm kind of scrolling for you to see. We have just highlighted several today that we found the most useful, and we think that would be the most useful for you to get started integrating some of these FAIR principles into your daily work. But I encourage you to explore more of these functions that BoxR has to offer on your own. And feel free to share with us your experience, or, I'd be interested in talking with you guys about the different ones that you find useful. So that is the end of the hands-on demonstration. And I think I'll pass it back to Tom, right?
So actually, before I get to this slide, were there any questions that kind of came up that might be worth sharing with everybody else?
Our group just talked about, using R in general, not as much about, and we talked a little bit about, GitHub as that being the next workshop and how that is going to be useful for people. But it seems like the demonstration, people were able to follow along well. So,
okay, great. Yeah, I know one of the questions that I thought was really useful that we didn't touch on when we were presenting was the, there was a question about collaborators outside of DCG or at other institutions. Definitely, we can work with them over Box. There's, even if their institution doesn't have or support Box, if your collaborators set up a free Box account, which some people have done that here today, you can go ahead and share your data resources with them the same way that we've done that here today. Definitely Box, it's a great resource for that. So everything that we presented here today certainly applies in those situations with those external collaborators. Just keep in mind the regulations associated with your data resources. So only share stuff with people who should have access to it. Make sure all the data use agreements are in place. If you have any questions about that, discuss that with your PIs, or the tech transfer office is fantastic about helping us with those sort of situations. So, keep in mind, like who should have access to it at what level, and also what Amber was mentioning, the waterfall sorry, I forget exactly the terminology used, but if you give people access to a folder, any
like nested.
Yeah, nested. Thank you. Any files or folders that are within that folder you gave them access to, that permission level is going to trickle down. So just keep that in mind. Okay, yeah. So if nobody has other questions, thank you again for coming today. we certainly, as I said, we want to kind of, develop a culture of all of us working together to help support FAIR principles. So we will be following up with you guys. We'll be sending out a post-workshop survey. We would really appreciate your feedback. As we said, this is the first one we did. So we, any suggestions for improvement, we're very happy to hear them. We're also going to be sharing some links that we think will be helpful. We've set up a web page for these workshops which you'll all have access to. We have our Gitter channel, which I'm not sure if people are familiar with Gitter. It's basically another chat service like Teams that the data science group has kind of spearheaded and is behind. So you're all welcome to join that. If you have any questions that pop up during your workday, feel free to send them in there, and somebody will be able to get back to you hopefully pretty quickly. And then Jonas and Daniel, they mentioned FAIR Fridays, and I'm not sure if actually Cloud for Bio came up in conversation, but these are regular meetings that happen every week, Wednesdays and I believe Wednesdays are the Cloud for Bio, FAIR Fridays obviously are on Fridays. If any questions you have about FAIR or FAIR practices, feel free to just hop into the FAIR Fridays. Cloud for Bio, I believe Jonas and Daniel are here. I believe that it could be a bit more technical, but if you have questions like the issue of working within BioWolf and you want to get access to Box, how would you go about doing that? That's I think a perfect place for discussing those sort of topics. So we will be sending out the links to all of these things either later today or tomorrow. Yeah.
Thank you all for joining. We have been excited to share this with all of you, and we reached out first to the fellows because obviously you guys are the ones kind of doing most of the analyses, but we're hoping that this is something that will kind of trickle up to other researchers too, and we're hoping to kind of expand this over time. So look out for our next workshop too, which will be on GitHub and R. Look out for information for that, and we hope to see you all there at the next workshop.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.